Hello! Have you noticed that free, liberal societies tend to exist in well-developed states? Or that free, market-based economies are often supported by complex bureaucracies? In fact, we have plenty of evidence that strong states are necessary to protect personal and political freedoms. And we know that free markets depend on a dense network of rules and on powerful organizations to enforce the rules. But do we need the existence of a strong and capable state for a free society and an open economy to come about in the first place? In this video, we look at this question with a focus on the cases of Belarus and Ukraine, two countries in Eastern Europe with similar starting points at the end of the 1980s, but very different trajectories since. Today, neither Belarus nor Ukraine can be considered completely liberal, free societies with open, well-functioning market economies. In short, neither Belarus nor Ukraine are open access orders as defined by Douglas North and colleagues. At the same time, Belarus and Ukraine have relatively modern state apparatus in which hundreds of formal state organizations function and millions of lines of formal laws and regulations exist. Belarus and Ukraine are far from the standards of government effectiveness and rule of law of Western and Northern Europe. But they certainly have a considerable degree of state capacity. But what is state capacity exactly? Let us start with the more basic concept of statehood. First, it entails control of violence. In Max Weber's famous work, a state has the monopoly of the means and use of violence over its territory. Second, a state needs international recognition from other states. A third important aspect of statehood is what we call state capacity. In a most general sense, it is the capacity of the state to implement decisions within its realm. State capacity as such includes the capacity to administer, the capacity to extract taxes and other resources from its territory and citizens, the capacity to deliver basic infrastructures, collect statistics, manage personal registers, build and maintain roads, and so on. And finally, state capacity includes the capacity to deliver public goods, such as health and education, and contribute to goals such as equality. Armed with this conceptual map, we collected empirical data to score the state capacity of Belarus and Ukraine. So how do these states do? Belarus and Ukraine had similar levels of social and economic development when they became independent from the Soviet Union. Both inherited planned but badly managed economies, big but inefficient bureaucracies with little capacity for policy making. Also, they inherited wide-ranging but chronically underfunded public services. But since the dissolution of the USSR, the paths of Belarus and Ukraine have sharply diverged. Belarus quickly became uninterested in serious political and economic reforms. At the same time, it managed to sustain a relatively adequate degree of public service provision and functioning bureaucracy. The lack of ambitious reforms meant that it avoided the fragmentation of state institutions, which we see in Ukraine. Ukraine attempted more radical reforms aimed at establishing a free market economy and a liberal democratic state. But these reforms were accompanied by a painful collapse of public service provision and a retreat of the state. More recently, the annexation of the Crimea and the rise of separatist republics meant the actual loss of control over some of the territory of the country in the east. Based on the data we collected for this research in 2018, we can say the following. First, Belarus has a very mixed record. In some areas, such as taxing capacity, it gets top scores. Elsewhere, however, it offers inadequate protection of property rights and has not implemented infrastructural reforms. Some services, such as the land registry or statistics, are well developed. These services are often linked to electronic systems that minimize openings for corruption. In reality, however, policy making is in the hands of the president and his administration. Belarus commits to a wide range of public services, a textbook example of a shallow but broad public service model influenced by the Soviet period. The delivery of these services is at a relatively high level, especially when it comes to healthcare, and education. Second, Ukraine does not score very well at all, but there is the promise and the start of reform. The level of service provision varies significantly across sectors. While healthcare is perceived as drastically in need of reform, postal services are evaluated as well developed. Administrative capacity definitely needs improvement, even when it comes to basic things, such as collecting statistics. Overall, it is hard to assess the current situation in this country, as many reforms are ongoing. This can be seen, for example, when it comes to the public administration and regional governance. The conflict in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions controlled by separatists obviously remains a major challenge for the state. The picture in both countries is complex. But if one thing is clear, it is that Belarus is not lagging behind Ukraine when it comes to state capacity, despite Ukraine being the more open society and the more free economy from the two. Returning to our original question, what role has state capacity played in the transition, or not, towards a free society and open economy? It is very likely that the preservation of relatively high levels of public service provision contributes to the stability of the regime in Belarus. A stable degree of public service provision, even if limited, decreases discontent against the political regime and grievances against the economic system. It decreases the impetus for reform. We should also remember that state capacity has a darker side. The capacity for surveillance and repressions certainly plays a role in the survival of non-democratic political regimes. But as the Ukrainian case shows, insufficient state capacity does not guarantee progress towards a liberal, democratic society and free market economy, with opportunities for all. On the contrary, the lack of sufficient state capacity has impeded reforms. It has limited the power of the state to impose new rules that regulate the market and ensure fair political competition. It has created popular discontent and a backlash against a societal transformation that has left many without adequate support. There is an opportunity for external actors, such as the EU, to help reforms and development towards an open access social order. Supporting strong and capable state institutions might not bring societal transformations on its own, but it will help reforms once they start, and it is valuable in its own right as well. For better or worse, we need the state, and we need strong institutions to bring about and sustain free markets and free societies. You can find more about our research in the EU-STRAT working paper series on our website.